I want to thank Stephanie Bailey and the Blue Outpost Texas Democrats organization for the work that you all are putting into the most important series of elections of our lifetimes, highlighting these critically important state house races, where for the first time in 20 years we have a chance to win a majority in the state legislature, is critical not only for getting back control of our state government and dismantling the infrastructure of voter suppression and voter intimidation and moving forward on the big things that we want to do for our fellow Texans. But it's also going to help us up ballot, whether they are the congressional races that we want to hold on to Democratic seats or the congressional races where we can flip a Republican seat into Democratic control, or defeating John Cornyn, Donald Trump's single greatest enabler in the United States Senate, and sending in his place MJ Hagar, who will represent us in a way that we can be proud of. Or this, Texas has a chance for the first time in 44 years, since 1976, to send our electoral college votes to the Democratic nominee, Joe Biden, and defeat Donald Trump, and thereby turn the page on Trumpism and begin the next necessary new chapter for this state and for our country. Texas has the chance to come through big time for America. And that fight is being led by these courageous state house candidates who are doing everything they can at this critical moment of truth. Thank you for highlighting them. Thank you for elevating the importance of these races. And thank you for the work that you're doing between now and November 3rd.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Blue Outpost Texas Democratic Forum, the second in a series. We are so thankful that you're here, so thankful that Beto would take some time to visit with us. Beto and I got to know each other on the campaign trail. What a wonderful, wonderful human being, represents our state so well, has Stay Tuned on his shirt. I hope you saw that. I certainly saw that. Yes, indeed, this is the most important election cycle, and we all know, and the last few days have really proven it. We want to stay upbeat and we want to stay happy. What happened the last couple of days with our president takes the wind right out of your sails. It's almost hard to believe, but here's the good news. The good news is we're going to beat him. We're going to beat him, and that's thrilling. And Beto mentioned, and I want to reiterate what it means to us here in Texas. If Joe Biden wins by just a little, we're a long way from being done here. But when Texas goes for Biden and sends 38 electors onto that heap, Donald Trump is not only defeated, but Trump isn't defeated, is gone. And civility returns, integrity returns, a government that looks out for people returns. It makes a huge difference. I've said this to so many people. What we're doing in Texas is the most important campaign work in the country, and I really do believe that. Now let's talk about the Texas House. We have some fine candidates and a real opportunity to flip the Texas House. We did well in 2018, gained 12 seats. Only need 9 more. You're going to hear from 2 candidates today that have a really, really, really good shot at being part of the class that flips the Texas House. Now imagine what happens to politics in the country when Democrats win the Texas House. It means that we can fix the gerrymandering problem in Texas. I believe that gerrymandering is the root cause of all of our difficulties. It turns people into enemy combatants. Where are the statesmen and stateswomen? When we flip the House, and when we take back control of redistricting and do right by Texans, we'll do right by democracy. And I think the rest of the country will watch, they'll see, and they'll follow, which is just fantastic. So there's a lot of energy. I'm traveling around the state virtually presently. Soon I'm going to be in my pickup truck. Stay tuned. But I can tell you the Democrats are fired up, and we have some wonderful, wonderful candidates, and you're going to be hearing from some tonight. Good friends of mine. But let's talk about our sponsors. First of all, thank you so much to the Blue Outpost Democrats for doing this. It's fabulous. And we have a list of sponsors that I'm going to read off. And I'm just so pleased and proud to be that they're helping and that I'm associated with this in a small way. First of all, 312th Family District Court Judge Clinton Chip Wells. Thank you so much. 270th Civil District Court Judge Deidre Davis. Club sponsors, the Blue Bayou Democrats, Meyerland Area Democrats, Texas Democratic Women Harris County Chapter, Houston Stonewall Young Democrats, Southwest Democrats, Cy-Fair Area Democrats, Humble Area Democrats, Democratic Club of the Woodlands, Energy and Environmental Democrats, the Road Women, Cypress Tomball Democrats, Kingwood Area Democrats, that's where I'm coming to you from, Spring Democratic Club. We have the royal sponsors are former County Clerk Diane Troutman. Diane, thank you so much. Good friend of mine. Carl Jones, Humble Area Democrats President John Carter. Thank you, John. Sapphire sponsors, the Texas Senate District 3 Committeewoman Shirley Layton, Texas Senate District 7 Democrats, and Attorney Mark Whitehead. And then finally, organizational sponsors, Powered by People, Harris County Democratic Party, Flip the Texas House, Sisters United Alliance, Swing Left Texas, Indivisible Houston, and Blue Action Democrats. I'm telling you, folks, it doesn't get any better than that. Is this an exciting time or what? I hope you know how many days we have until early voting. 32. I hope you know how many days we have until election. I don't. 54, I think. We have to work hard. We are working hard. You're working hard. And because of all this hard work and energy and enthusiasm, we're going to win. And so I'm just delighted to be part of this. And thank you for joining and hearing these great candidates. We're going to talk about flipping the house. And what I'd like to do now is turn it over to my friends who are going to lead the rest of the evening, Mr. Jaime Rodriguez and Ms. Carly Mosier. Take it away.
Thank you, Mike. And it's good to see you again. And it's good to hear tonight on the actual road very soon here in Texas.
I'll be on the road.
Wow. That's exciting. That is exciting. All right. Well, we'll see you again Sunday night. And
we'll see you Sunday.
Appreciate everything you're doing for us, Mike.
Yeah, certainly.
All right. Carly, so we have a great show tonight, huh?
Don't we just? We have an all-female candidate panel tonight. I'm very excited about it. And we are currently streaming live on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitter tonight. So join us at Blue Outpost TX on all of those platforms. We will be asking for donations for these beautiful, amazing, wonderfully talented, smart candidates that will be working towards flipping these incredibly consequential elections.
Excellent. And also, you to the audience, just be aware that at 8 o'clock tonight, in 1 hour, we're going to start asking your questions. So again, go to Facebook, to the main Facebook page where this is being displayed, the Blue Outpost TX on Facebook. Leave your questions there this whole hour. And at 8 o'clock, we'll start asking your questions. So without further ado, though, Carly, why don't you go ahead and introduce us to the two candidates we have tonight?
We are incredibly excited to have tonight the wonderful Elise Markowitz from HD 28 and our fantastic candidate in HD 64, Angela Brewer.
Hey.
Howdy, Liz and Angela. How are y'all?
Doing amazingly well. Thanks for putting this together and giving us the opportunity to reach out to more voters.
Good, yeah.
I definitely am feeling that energy of election day sneaking up on us pretty quickly, and it's so exciting to get here with everyone and start channeling that energy into some good hard work for the next less than 2 months.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely electricity's in the air. So let's tell the audience how the format of the show is, and then we'll get started. What we're going to do first is start to get to know the candidates. A lot of times people
Look at my smoothie stash.
My son's here.
I love it.
Yes. This is the real life of an actual candidate.
Bring him on. Let's see him. Is he there? Bring him on.
You don't want to encourage that, Jaime. I promise.
Oh, okay, there we go. Okay. Fair enough. So we're going to get to know you candidates. And the way we're going to do that, we have 2 segments to get to know you. The first one is a lightning round where we're just going to expect 1 or 2 word answers. So real quick, the questions kind of rapid fire. And like we said, they're just to get to know you kind of questions. They're not there to trip you up or anything. They're all answers that you know very well. But then the second segment, we're going to ask you some philosophical questions. So these are the kinds of questions that anybody should be asking any candidate anywhere for any office, because we want to know how you think about things. So that the answer that you give is not as important as how you came to that answer. How you came to that answer is what's very interesting to us. And then finally, we'll get to a segment where we talk about the issues of the day and get you on the record talking about what's going on in the world today. And then the last moments of the hour, we'll let you talk about your district specifically. And that'll be the end of the first hour. And then again, at 8 o'clock, we will have audience questions and kind of wrap up at the very end with your 2-minute closing statements. Mm-hmm. So that's the format of the evening. Let's go ahead and get started. All right,
Awesome.
Carly, take it away.
All right. Well, we'll start with the lightning round. So quick answers for all.
Introductions.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. We're doing our 1 minute introduction live on camera. So we'll do 1 minute each. And when we do our questions, we will start with one of you and then start with another one the next time, just in the spirit of fairness. So we will start in alphabetical order with Miss Angela Brewer. You have 1 minute. Introduce yourself.
Great. My name is Angela Brewer. I'm running for state representative in House District 64. That's up in Denton County. It's primarily the city of Denton with some of our lake communities on the south side of town, and then northwest Denton County with a couple of small rural communities out there in the countryside. Denton's my hometown, so I am just couldn't be prouder than I am right now running to be the state representative from the community that really helped shape me. And I got into this race because I think it's time to see our Denton County values reflected down in Austin a little bit better than they have been in recent years. Denton County and City of Denton, we've got a couple of universities here. We're a community that loves education. We're a community that loves the arts. One of the best places in the state, even in the country, to go and see live music, to appreciate theater and fine arts. It's a really creative community, very innovative. It's also a community where folks really care about their neighbors and have a lot of compassion for one another. And we have a real good team spirit here in Denton. Those are the kind of values I want to take to Austin, and what I think our state capital has really been missing over the last 20 years or so. I'm ready to take things in a new direction, and couldn't be prouder than I am right now running to represent my hometown in the Texas legislature.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Angela. That was a wonderful introduction. And next we will have our wonderful candidate from right here in the Houston area, HD 28, Elise Markowitz.
Hey y'all, I'm Dr. Eliz Markowitz, and I'm running for Texas House District 28, which is in Fort Bend County. As Carly said, we're right on in the greater Houston area. HD 28 is actually the fastest growing and most populated House district in Texas. And our population has more than doubled since the 2016 presidential election. Fort Bend County is considered one of the most diverse counties in the country, and it's time for a change. I'm running for this district because I was born in Fort Bend County, and I want to give back to the community that really helped mold me into the person I am. And I think it's about time that we have a representative that puts people over politics and special interests. So with that said, I hope to achieve high quality public education, accessible, affordable healthcare, proper emergency management protocols, and a whole plethora of other things that we can do once we put an end to the systemic gerrymandering that has plagued this state.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Eliz. That was a wonderful, wonderful introduction to yourself. I really appreciate that. Okay, we're going to start with our lightning round. I think Jaime's got some questions to start us off with.
Yeah, and just reminding the audience, so all of tonight you're going to hear us over and over talking about sending in your questions, but also about donating. The reason that we chose these candidates for this set of forums is because they are the 17 state house seats that were within 10 points of winning in the last cycle. So they are the most likely to flip and the easiest to flip. So what we want you to do is take out your wallets all night long and give $17 to each of these candidates. So in memory and commemoration of the fact that they are the 17 in most play. So $17 each of these candidates. And with that, we'll go on to the lightning round. So if you're ready, let's start. Okay. So just to get to know who you are and all that, who is your opponent? And let's start with Angela.
I'm running against Lynn Stuckey.
Okay, Elise.
I'm running against Gary Gates.
Yes, fantastic. Okay, so second super gotcha question. Not at all. How long have you lived in your district? Eliz, we'll start with you.
Off and on for about 23, 24 years.
My family, we moved here when I was 10 years old. And as an adult, I've lived away a little bit, but come back several times and very happy to be back home now.
Okay, Angela, have you ever been elected to any kind of office before as an adult?
I have never been elected to a public office.
Okay, and Eliz?
I have not.
Okay.
Okay, here's a good question that we had last Tuesday that I really like, and I'd love to hear your answers. So next spring, President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, they come to your district. Where are you going to take them to lunch? We'll start with you, Angela.
I'm going to take them to Viet Bites. They have my very favorite noodle soups over there, and it's right by the campus of the University of North Texas, almost on campus. And so I'd want to show off my campus anyway. And so we're going to go over to Viet Bites for lunch.
Smart. I mean,
take them to Tacos Adrian for some legitimate tacos that represent the diverse district we live in. Plus, they're incredible.
They are.
You know, in Texas, and I know we have a national audience, in Texas, usually when we ask this question of candidates, the answer is usually some kind of a barbecue place or some kind of a taco house. So, Angela, that's interesting that you have a different take on that answer. Okay.
Maybe because it got cold here today, the soup is on my mind.
Oh, there we go. A Texas cold front. What, it got down to 90 today? Is that how that works?
We got down to 65 today.
Wow.
They looked out today.
Eliz, okay, so tell us, have you ever run for this position before?
So we had a special election that took place in November of 2019, and then the special election runoff for this race, which took place in January of 2020. So we've been running for this seat, marathon style, for almost a year and a half now.
I have to say, not my question, but I have to say I'm so excited to be on with Eliz tonight because I was making phone bank calls into Fort Bend County out of my living room in Denton back in October and November to try and help boost her up in that special.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, I was happy to be in there helping.
But the question goes to you as well, Angela.
No, I've never run for public office before. This is my first race.
Oh, good. Okay, well then here's another one. Angela, we'll start with you. Who's your political hero?
Ooh, that's a great question, and I'm a little bit torn. I'm going to go with Ann Richards tonight. Barbara Jordan's the other one that's always right there at the forefront of my mind when I think about this. But Ann Richards is the person that brought me into politics. First time she ran for governor when I was 16, and I was just starstruck by her and how brilliant she was and how well she was able to connect with people and really understand what was going on in Texans' lives and reflect that every time I heard her speak. So she's the person that helped me understand that I'm a Democrat, and she's definitely one of my biggest and best political heroes.
That's awesome. Eliz?
So great answer, Angela. And I think one that we would all pick. And so since you took the greatest answer, I'll say Margaret Thatcher, because she definitely taught us how to be strong, independent women and never let anyone crush our spirits, regardless of whether what we're fighting for is popular.
Okay,
Those women.
So, you know, the difference between the two parties can't be more stark and more clear nowadays. And one of the biggest differences is that one party just doesn't want to read anything. They don't want to know anything, facts, any of it. And the other party does like to read. So, Dr. Markowitz, what are you reading right now, and what would you recommend our audience read?
So I'm actually reading a short story compilation by Margaret Atwood, trying to get through all of her previous works as well. And you too can purchase that for only $3.99 on Amazon.com for your Kindle.
There we go. Angela, what are you reading?
So I don't know if I'd recommend this for everyone necessarily. I teach at University of North Texas, and so I just started a new class this semester, and I'm reading the book that we're using in my class. It's called Changing the Subject. It's about rhetoric and empathy, and how a new theory on how we can use rhetoric in the way that we structure messages and the way that we talk with people as a way to connect with others instead of what is so dominant in our politics today of othering people, of kind of creating division that our president and a lot of his supporters are so fond of. This is a very different perspective on how we can use our language and how we shape messages in our discourse in order to connect with others and find our common denominators.
Is that a
textbook? It's not a textbook per se. It's written by a professor. It's a theory that she's developed. Her name's Dr. Blankenship, if you're interested in changing the subject.
Just totally off the subject. My niece is getting her doctorate in psychology, statistical analysis, especially when it comes to identity, particularly. So all of that, to me, I'm just like, send that to me. I would like to recommend that to her.
Yeah, for sure.
The more we do these types of forums and debates on the Democratic side, the more I realize how much I love nerds. Nerds.
I'm also reading a book for fun for my book club, but I actually can't remember the title of it right now. It's really good, though. I've been enjoying it.
You had us at I read, I mean, so that's... Okay, Carly, why don't we go on to the next section of the evening and get us to the 1 minute?
We are going to, before I do that, I do want to remind all of our viewers, please make sure that you put in the chat on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, wherever it is that you're watching, any questions that you would like these wonderful candidates to answer for us. We want to make sure that we address not only our concerns, but your concerns. You're the voter. And we want you to we're making a call to action, $17 for these 17 flippable House seats. So please give $17 to each of the candidates. You'll see across the bottom of the screen as the night goes on, the banner with their websites and all their social channels on it. And we want to make sure that not only do you give your money, which is important, but you give your time. So you can check out all volunteer opportunities for them, phone banking, text banking, lick drops, writing postcards, all of that great stuff. So thank you. Do that now. And we will move on to our philosophical part of our program, where we ask you questions that we find to be particularly pressing, just about how we manage our thoughts and feelings about the process. So our first question is, what do you think is the responsibility of journalists and online activists in spreading truthful information into the public sphere? What is their responsibility? We will start with Angela.
Wow, that is a fantastic question. And coming on the heels of kind of the revelations from Bob Woodward's tapes of President Trump, and some of the questions that Bob Woodward is now facing about the responsibility of journalism, and thinking about, if he had this information months ago, why didn't he share what he knew, so that maybe we could have thought about the way President Trump was presenting himself and presenting information differently. I think it is, philosophically, we really have to embrace free press. We really have to stand by journalism. There are days I get frustrated by paywalls on newspapers and things like that, and then I have to check myself and think, no, this is a valuable product, and they deserve to get paid, and we need to support especially investigative journalists and folks who are really digging deep on important stories that are going on in our communities. So I am really very deeply bothered and frustrated by the way that the president speaks about the media and that tone. It's not just the way that he speaks about it, but that the way he speaks about the media trickles down, and we see lots of people talking about things like fake news, which is just way inappropriate and out of line.
Yeah, thank you. And Lisa?
Yeah, so I think not just for journalists, but for humanity in general, the first principle should be to do no harm. And the fact that we have individuals who are willing to withhold information for personal prestige and gain in order to further themselves rather than benefit the greater good is problematic at best. I think the role of our journalists is not only to do no harm, but to expose any injustices that do exist and any type of behavior that is going to harm the public in any way, shape, or form. While I appreciate everything that Bob Woodward did in exposing it, I think that it would have changed the narrative quite a bit had we known 6 months ago. And perhaps we wouldn't be looking at almost 200,000 Americans dead and over 6.5 million living with the permanent effects of COVID-19.
Okay, yeah, Liz. So tell us how you decide in your mind. How would you decide when it's time to raise taxes, lower taxes, or keep taxes the same? What's that calculus look like in your mind?
So I don't think it would be up to just me, first of all. I think I would need to have an informed decision-making process where all the different stakeholders are taken into account, because I don't think we can just go willy-nilly and say, hey, now is time to raise the taxes. But I would say that with regards to property taxes in particular, since in 2011, the Republican administration took out $5.4 billion in our public education funding, which left the burden on the taxpayers, since the state was only paying 36% of public education, and then putting the 64% onto taxpayers. That not only goes against the Texas Constitution, but it harms the overall quality of not just our life, but our education as a whole. I think if we are living in a society where there's the need to improve social services in order to improve our economy, in order to improve our healthcare outcomes, in order to improve our education outcomes, in order to pass environmental justice regulations and criminal justice reforms, then we do need to increase taxes. But also would say that if we implemented a corporate income tax, and we're only one of 4 states in the union that doesn't have one, we would not be raising taxes on the people, but on corporations.
Angela?
Yeah, I really appreciate where you were finishing up there, Eliz, that I think the first thing we have to think about when we're looking at taxes and who's paying is exactly that question, who's paying right now, and figuring out how we introduce more fairness into that system. So right now we definitely have a taxation system that is built on the backs of individual families, and really letting business and larger organizations off the hook. We know that they very much benefit from all of the services that government provides in the same way that my family does, and often even more than the ways that my family benefits from all of the services that government provides. So it's time for them to step up and start paying their fair share of what's going on in our state too. The other thing that I would like to say about that, so first of all, thinking about fairness and looking to fairness and making sure everyone's contributing, is the idea of being kind of long-term in our thinking. I think our Texas legislature gets very focused on a 2-year cycle with the budget, and they very much neglect thinking about long-term planning, looking 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road. Where's our state going to be? And what do we need to do today to invest in the future of Texas? Not just to make a budget, make the ends of the budget meet in the next 2-year cycle, but what are we doing to make sure every student who's starting kindergarten today is finishing with a good education that builds our economy going forward for the next 50 years or 100 years. So thoughtfulness about fairness in taxation, and then also thinking about the long-term picture of what are we doing with our revenue and how are we spending these funds.
And I'm just going to remind the candidates, because I know that we're trying to solve the world's issues in 1 minute or less. But if you'll keep to the time as much as possible, we'll get a lot more questions tonight. So,
but I will say that your answer was, to me, both of you, right on point. And I do think that we often are lacking a lot of long-term planning. So I really appreciate you both thinking about that and bringing that to bear in your question answering. So my next question, since Eliz brought up the Constitution, I have a question about how you feel about the Constitution. Do you consider it a living document or a static document? But I'm going to start with Angela first.
Yeah, so my goodness, I love these questions so much. So I call myself a democracy nerd. I started my career really in teaching civics and teaching about the Constitution and a citizen's role in a democracy and what it is that we need to do as participants in our government and in our communities to be effective. So I have actually thought about this question quite a lot and taught about it a lot and talked with students about it a lot. And I definitely consider the Constitution to be a living document, right? This is a structure and a format that was put in place for us and gifted to us. It certainly had a lot of flaws in the time that it was written, and over time we've made improvements. We've extended suffrage to lots of different groups of folks in our country. We have ended slavery through an amendment to the Constitution. We have made changes to this document to help us live more closely to those values and the ideals that our country was founded on. So I hope we continue to go forward with that and really embrace what's good about our Constitution and make the changes necessary when we need to make changes.
Perfect. Eliz?
I do believe that the Constitution is a living document. I think, excuse me, if we were to consider it a non-living document, we wouldn't progress as a society at all moving forward. And quite frankly, we don't have the same circumstances that existed when the Constitution was created. And so it's necessary to update according to the needs of the people of today's society and ensure that we are actually meeting those needs and situations and circumstances to the best of our ability as a society.
Okay, Liz, tell us, how do you, once the government gets the revenue, how do you prioritize how the government spends that revenue?
So again, I don't think that's a solely one-person task, but I think that you need to create a coalition. And one of the things that I've been very adamant about is building a bipartisan coalition. It wasn't too many years ago that Republicans and Democrats were able to work together to solve the most pressing issues of the day. The vitriol and hatred has seemed to hinder that, but I think we need to get back to that to understand the actual problems that we're facing and ensure that we are addressing the most pressing needs. As everyone knows, education is my passion, and I truly believe that education is the foundation of our society. I believe that if we have a solid public education system, our health outcomes are going to improve. We're going to have lower crime rates, quality of life overall improves, and quite frankly, everything comes in an upward flow. It's trickle up economics, right? The more solid our education system is, the more solid our society is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would prioritize education.
Angela, what do you prioritize in government?
Hi, my son's back. So I think this is a lot of going back to the Constitution question in a lot of ways, that we're talking about representative government and how does representative government work. And so what we're focused on is making sure the needs of our constituents are represented. So thinking about my job in the Texas legislature is to go down and represent the needs of the folks in my community and the folks I was elected to represent. So that's my first priority, is thinking about what do my constituents need? What are we lacking? What kind of services are, I'm going to tear it in just a second.
There has never been a more appropriate moment for 2020 than right now. This is the most 2020 call I've done yet. But it just shows just how beautiful women can be in tackling multiple things at once. So keep going.
Mom candidates have a whole other thing we're doing.
Right. That's right.
So to get back to the question, I think, this is about representative democracy and going to constituents first, seeing what the community needs and making sure those needs are met. And I can't wait to team up with Eliz in the state legislature and fight for public education, because we know first and foremost that is what our communities need. And
absolutely.
Vigorous, strong public education systems, and we're going to go down to Austin. We're going to fight for that.
Hashtag elected teacher. So this will be our last philosophical question. I really like this question quite a bit. Michelle Obama says, when they go low, we go high. Do you agree, Angela?
Oh, yes, I do. I do agree. Sometimes I don't feel that, but it might not be where my heart is, but it's definitely where my head is. I think that negative campaigning is actually voter suppression. I think that it is a reason we have a lot of Americans and a lot of Texans who check out of the political process entirely. It's one of the reasons when you talk with folks, they're like, oh, Republicans and Democrats, they're exactly alike. And those of us who are Democrats, we're like, no, we're nothing alike. But I think a lot of the sense that we are so similar to the other party comes from sort of methods and practices and campaigns, and the feeling that, well, everyone's just in the mud, going for each other's jugular. And I think that really contributes to people checking out of the process. So I agree with Michelle Obama that we are better off when we go high. because it helps people stay engaged. It helps us be in a position to show voters and show all of our constituents that we are different than them. We are thinking about the needs of our communities and putting our communities first.
I love that. Same question.
Yeah, so I 100% agree with everything that Michelle Obama says. When they go low, we go high. I think if we are to do anything opposite of that, we're really going against everything that we've been fighting for the past few years. We've been saying that it shouldn't be about name calling. It shouldn't be about bigotry and hatred and racism and this need to tear people down. And so when we stoop to that level, it lessens our credibility. Now, I would make a caveat to say that just because we go high doesn't mean we don't call people out when they are saying things that are just flat out wrong. It is our job as human beings, not Democrats, but human beings, to call out when people are racist, when people are bigoted, when people are prejudiced in any way, shape, or form. And so, yes, we must go high, but we must also call out individuals for their character flaws.
I completely agree.
Yeah, that's the end of the philosophical questions. And, again, to the audience, you might wonder why we start with these types of questions on a forum like this. But remember, sometimes we elect candidates based on the issue of the day that we're solidly behind, but we don't really know the candidates. And so 6 or 7 years later, after they've been elected and they've been in office, we start to get to know them and realize that they don't have the core values that we really were looking for 6 years ago when we hired them in the first place.
That's right.
So ask your candidates some philosophical questions, not just the questions of the day, when you're talking to candidates. And Carly, remind the audience what their responsibility is tonight.
So your first responsibility is to give us your questions, drop them in the live comments section of Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. Make sure that you get those to us so that these fantastic candidates can answer your concerns, not just ours. This is about you and them, not necessarily just about us and in our entire state. Also, we are doing a call to action of donating $17 to each of these candidates, at least, at the very minimum. I always encourage more money. There is no campaign that's successful without it, unfortunately. So until we change anything within our government, we have to give these candidates our money and our time. So give this $17 and then sign up for a phone bank shift, sign up for a text bank shift, sign up to do 100 postcards for your favorite candidate that's on the call tonight or any of these forums. This is so important. We cannot do it without you. Now, we are going to move on to our section about actual issues.
Okay.
So, Jaime, we will start with you.
Yeah. So, Angela, let's start with you. This is the #1 polling routine nationwide, so we may as well ask you all about it first, get it out of the way. And it has to do with healthcare. And we're going to pose the question in this way: how do you provide the most healthcare to the most people given our resources? Angela?
Great question. First thing we have to do is take the Medicaid expansion under the Affordable Care Act. Texas is giving up $10 billion a year by not accepting the Medicaid expansion. 1.6 million Texans could be insured tomorrow or the day after we accept the expansion, basically. 1.6 million Texans. That's so many people. It is going to be a lifeline for rural hospitals that are really struggling to stay in business right now. And we have to take the Medicaid expansion first and foremost. The other thing we have to do is what we were talking about earlier, and really thinking about what are the needs in our communities and how do we allocate our resources that are available according to meeting those needs. So you can just take all of it there. There you go. And I know in our community, what we're, okay, well, you have to give it to me so I can reach it. Thank you. In our community, we don't have a county hospital, actually, in Denton County. Folks who are uninsured and have no way to pay for healthcare are directed to go to Dallas. Dallas is getting a little tired of this. It's been going on for almost 30 years in our county. So we really need to focus on meeting the needs of our community within the community and allocating resources that way. I also don't want to forget MHMR. We have a mental health care crisis in our state. There's no other way to say it. I had a chance to sit down with the chief of police here a few months ago, and in our 45-minute conversation, everything that he wanted to talk about came back to mental health care. And I thought that was a really fascinating reflection of how important that was just to the safety and success and just happiness in our communities. So,
right, we'll
let's put a link. Yeah, let's put a link for now. Yeah.
Eliz, we'll go to
Yeah.
Yeah, so as Angela said, the first thing we need to do is take the $10 billion in Medicaid expansion off the table. I think that one thing we don't emphasize enough is this has already come out of taxpayer pockets. So this is already paid for, and we'd be able to insure this 1.6 million uninsured right off the bat. Then I would also argue that we need to stop linking healthcare to employment. For far too long, it's been, okay, well, you're entitled to healthcare if you have a job, but healthcare is a human right. Nobody should be denied preventative, emergent, mental, prescription, ophthalmological, dental, or any other form of healthcare if it is so needed. So I would say that we need a public option for healthcare that we could phase in progressively over the next 10, 15 years. So eventually we would have all individuals covered under a Medicare for all option and allow individuals who say work in the unions and are happy with their healthcare package that has been provided, they're allowed to keep that. We also need to address teacher healthcare because teachers pay so much in healthcare and they have not been given a boost in over 20 years to help pay for that healthcare, a cost of living increase. And so we need to make sure that our state employees and our teachers and our union workers and everyone involved has healthcare options.
Wow, that was great. You both are such impressive women, and I'm so glad to have you running for these seats. Again, make sure to drop your questions in the live comments. Also, make sure to donate $17 at the very least, and at least an hour of your time a week until the election. We have 32 days until early voting starts. That will be on October 13th, and then election day, of course, is November 3rd. Make sure you have your vote plan so that you can go vote for these amazing candidates. Okay, we will start with Eliz on this one. What does comprehensive gun policy look like to you?
So I think comprehensive gun policy is something that any responsible gun owner would embrace wholeheartedly. As a gun owner myself and a CHL holder, I truly believe we need to have responsible gun reform. We need to have universal background checks that ensure that individuals with any violent criminal history of abuse, or any mental health conditions that could cause violent outbursts are not eligible to have access to a weapon. We need to have emergency protective orders. So if someone is an assumed threat to society, given due process, I think it should definitely go through a judge, but weapons can be removed from the home. I think we need to have more training. If anyone has ever gone to get their concealed handgun license, they will know that you only have to hit the target 70% of the time to walk around in society with a weapon. And to me, that's not adequate. I don't want these people walking around with a 70% chance of taking someone down, especially when we've seen time and time again that these weapons are used for ill. They're not used in a protective sense. I would also say that we need to treat the scourge of gun violence as the public health crisis that it is. For far too long, we've blown it off in that sense, and that we need to have more training protocols in school, not to militarize our school as Abbott would like, but to actually provide mental health services so that these situations don't occur in the first place.
Thank you so much. Angela?
Thank you, Eliz. You said all the things I wanted to say, and I'm going to add a couple ideas. Yeah. So definitely there for background check on every single gun sale. And I would like to point out that most gun owners support this, most Texans support this, like upwards of almost 80%, right? This isn't a controversial issue, actually, that people feel better when we are just checking out who's buying guns. And we know that background checks have kept guns out of the hands of folks who shouldn't have them about 3 million times since we got them in our country. So it's a very practical solution to solving some of our gun violence problems. And I really appreciate that Eliz pointed out that we need to talk about gun violence as a public health issue. We have about 3,500 Texans who die of gun violence every year. 3,500 Texans. We lead the country in number of gun deaths. And we have to start looking at this issue as a public health issue more so than as a political issue, because we have to find some solutions to this many people dying. The other thing that I would add to the list is thinking about safe storage. It just kills me every time I turn on the news, and it seems to happen every week or two, and find out that a child somewhere has found a gun and either hurt themselves or hurt someone that they loved, or killed themselves or killed someone that they loved with a gun that was left unsecured. So we need to really focus on that training that Eliz was talking about, making sure that safe storage is a big part of that messaging about training, because kids shouldn't have access to guns.
So Angela, let me take this next one to you, and right at the wrong moment, I think.
Is that some art that we get to?
Yes, the solar system. We have the planets.
I very much like kid art. And actually, I was going to take a minute.
Let's start with you, Liz, then. Oh.
Ooh, all right. Very good. Let's start with Eliz on this one. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's start with Eliz then. So Eliz, the big issue of the day, probably the biggest issue of the day, is social justice reform. And it's a big buzzword. A lot of people misunderstand it. Tell us what social justice reform means to you.
Yeah, so that's a hard question to answer in a minute, but social justice reform to me means that everybody is treated equally under the law. I think for far too long, we've had prejudice and racism, systemic racism built into all of our institutions, quite frankly, since the founding of this country. And we need to tackle reforms in order to ensure that all individuals, regardless of skin color, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, geographical location, socioeconomic status, that everyone is treated fairly and equally. I think we need to have more proper training for our law enforcement officers. We need to have implicit bias training. We need to ensure that we have our law enforcement officers wearing body cams. And we also need to look at the way we're treating individuals in our criminal justice system, because right now we're using it as a mental health care system, as a drug decontamination system. It's not what it should be. And quite frankly, the fact that we spend $22,000 a year in Texas per prisoner and only $9,000 a year per student in the state of Texas is shocking at best. So we're doing nothing to stop the school to prison pipeline. We're simply exacerbating the situation. And coupled with private prisons as well in Texas, the whole thing just spirals out of control, and we need complete and comprehensive reform.
Angela, what does social justice reform look like to you?
Ooh, yeah, that is a tough one for a minute. But I would agree with what Eliz was saying about equal justice under law, and that we need to really focus on policymaking that pays attention to reaching that equal justice, making sure that each and every Texan and each and every American has an equal chance to be recognized in the law. Okay, you're going to have to give me a minute, please. Thank you. That we
breathe.
My son keeps popping up here, and I don't know if y'all caught on yet. My son is mixed race. My husband's Black, and so social justice issues, in particular the Black Lives Matter movement, is very present in my home. This isn't just an issue that I am concerned about because I care about my neighbors and my friends. This is an issue I care about because it's my son's future, and we have to make some changes when it comes to social justice. I need my child to grow up in a place that when he is a big boy, and he is perceived as maybe being frightening to some people, or being aggressive when he's not actually being aggressive, that we have a different place for him when he gets bigger, and for my husband today.
I'm don't make me cry. Okay.
I often don't talk about it because of that. I get a little emotional, but
you should. Yeah. This is the time, and this is certainly the place to do it. It's important, especially, and I will just off track a little bit for a second, but for white progressive women particularly, oftentimes we just gloss over these issues because we're an ally and it's fine, but you don't feel the personal connection that others might feel. And so I do think it's important. And then that's why that's an even huger reason for it. Elect a teacher, elect a mom, elect a woman, period. It's amazing. Okay, we're going to move on to the next question. Still, it's actually incredibly prescient for what we're dealing with right now. Eliz, I'll start with you so that Angela can manage the little one over there. Now, if we start talking about education, as we've found throughout our evening tonight, we could be asking a million questions, right? We could ask, teacher certification, what the differences between charter and public schools are, access to Wi-Fi between urban and suburban areas, the funding for higher education, Robin Hood law, all of these things. So, because we don't have all that much time, we're going to give you a minute each to solve education in Texas. Go, Eliz.
So we need to dismantle the current public school funding formulas, and we need to revamp the entire way that our public schools are funded. We need to ensure that we never allow another charter school to be established within the state of Texas, because quite frankly, even public charter schools are not available to the entire public. It all depends on whether there's busing routes available, whether you have 2 full-time working parents, whether it's in the right geographical location. So quite frankly, our taxpayer money is not going to serve the entire public. And when we invest in these charter schools, we're taking away money from our public schools. Now, I've said before that our entire society is built upon a solid public education system. And so the only way that we will continue to see economic growth is if we invest in our schooling system. So I would say we need to figure out a way to have equitable funding. We need to make sure that we have a curriculum that is statewide based. So if individuals move from one area to the other, they can pick up where they left off. And we need to ensure that we have teachers who are not teaching to a standardized test. One of the things that I have said repeatedly is the first piece of legislation I would file would be to eliminate the STAR test. I think that we spend far too much time and money teaching to a test that has no bearing on student or teacher or institution, educational aptitude or achievement. And so we should be focused more on proactive, productive learning, experiential learning, and make sure that we have teachers who are treated as the queens and kings that they are. Because quite frankly, without teachers, we wouldn't be able to have a society that functions at all.
That's right. And I know it's hard to do it in a minute. Go ahead, Angela, you.
First of all, co-sign all of that. I'm going to add a couple of things kind of on the ends, right? Oh, but Eliz, I want on that bill with you on STAR testing. Like I am right there for eliminating the STAR test
on these forums. It's great.
I'm so excited about that. It's a priority of mine too. So I'm glad that I'm going to have a teammate on that. I'm down in Austin. I'm going to start on either end of education. I want to talk about early childhood education. I want to talk about higher ed in my what's left of a minute. I believe that we have to have universal pre-K in our state. We are grappling with a lot of difficulties in early childhood literacy and making sure that every child in Texas is ready to be a learner when they enter the classroom. We invest a lot in kids' education over the 13 years of kindergarten through 12th grade. We spend a lot of money on that, but we need to invest in that foundational year of pre-K to make sure that every student is entering the kindergarten classroom prepared to learn, prepared to be a student, that we need to level that playing field for kids so that we get the most out of that 13-year investment we make in the rest of their education. Other thing I want to talk about for a minute is higher education. I have 2 universities in my district, University of North Texas, go Mean Green, and Texas Women's University across town. We also have a community college, North Central Texas College here. I will represent about 55,000 college students here in House District 64. And we have to do a better job in the state of Texas investing in higher education. Over the last 15 years, we've seen higher ed funding slip by almost 25% from coming from the state to now coming out of students' pockets. So what we see is that my students are all working full-time, going to school full-time, and still taking out full student loan burdens in order to pay for their education. When I was in college in the 90s, if you worked full-time, you could pay for school. It's not true anymore, and we need to get back to that system.
Okay, if y'all can keep it under a minute, I'm going to ask you one more question before we get to the final minutes of the hour. In 2017, East Texas experienced one of the worst rain events in all of American history when Hurricane Harvey hit and just kind of stayed for a couple of days, spinning over the Houston area. And at the time, Governor Abbott said that he didn't want to release funds from the Rainy Day Fund. So what the heck is the Rainy Day Fund for in Texas, if not for one of the largest rain events in American history? And Angela, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it blows my mind every time I think about what happened after Harvey and that we didn't use the Rainy Day Fund for literally a rain catastrophe. I think that's what the Rainy Day Fund should be used for those unexpected events or crises that we face that we haven't been able to plan for because nobody knew it was coming. So something like a natural disaster, like a hurricane, like our friends in the West Coast are facing fires. Fortunately, we haven't had much of that in Texas, but if we did, because with climate change, we might. When we have natural disasters facing our state, I think that's what the Rainy Day Fund is for. I also think in the wake of COVID-19, clearly a health disaster is the perfect opportunity to dip into that Rainy Day Fund to try and help support small businesses in our state and to support individuals who are out of work because of the health crisis.
Fantastic.
Liz?
Yeah, so I mean, in the past 5 years, we've had 3 500-year floods: the Hurricane Harvey, the Tax Day floods, and Memorial Day floods. And so, while we may think that we're safe for another 1,500 years, we simply know that that's not the case. Mm-hmm. And the fact that so many individuals were displaced during Harvey and during these other floods, and they are still waiting for governmental support, is mind-boggling to me. I would also emphasize that we need to have proactive planning, not just for our hurricane and weather events, but as Angela said, I think COVID-19 was a prime example of when we should have used the Rainy Day Fund. We should have tapped into that money to come up with proactive measures to safely reopen our businesses, safely reopen our schools, to ensure that we could get back to some semblance of normality instead of thinking that it would disappear when the weather was warm or some miracle would come, which quite frankly has led Texas to have more deaths from COVID-19 than many countries.
Yeah, that was, you both give such great, powerful messages. And just like Thursday, I'm so impressed and encouraged by the spirit of cooperation between the two of you and between our other previous candidates and I'm sure what will come. It promises to really put a lot of energy into the bills that you're going to want to pass. Now, don't forget, audience members, we're about to get to the audience questions shortly. So make sure you drop any last minute questions. We will hope If we do not, I encourage both of our candidates to go onto the Facebook Live and any other of the platforms that we're using and answer those questions because they will be in the comments for this video. So make sure you do that, candidates, if you can. But before we get to our audience questions, we want to remind everybody to go to these websites, give $17, sign up for a shift to volunteer, make sure we get these amazing candidates elected so that they can work together on these amazing bills about education and everything else, and redistricting, which will be a big issue in 2021. Again, donate, time, money. Okay, so 1 minute each. to describe your district. What is important in your district? What are the issues facing your district specifically that you want to address here that maybe we have not gotten to? Angela, we'll start with you on this one.
Okay. So I forced higher ed into the conversation already because it is such an important part of our community. With the two universities here, education is the backbone of our local economy between the universities and our public ed system, K through 12. So education is my priority. I'm coming out of the classroom, headed to the Capitol in January, and plan to bring a teacher's heart to the Capitol and to problem solving down in Austin. And really thinking about centering teachers in education, because what I know for sure as a teacher is that when teachers are empowered and teachers are treated as professionals, that they are going to make sure students come first. So I think our job as policymakers is to put teachers first and to recognize that if we do that, if we recognize their professionalism and the incredible work that teachers are doing in our classrooms, then they will in turn take care of our kids. And so that's a big priority of mine going down to Austin. Then, of course, healthcare. We cannot ignore the needs in our state. Texas is at the top of all the wrong lists when it comes to health outcomes, and we need to really be diligent in our work about bringing our state up to speed when it comes to caring for every Texan.
Thank you so much. And before we get to our audience questions, 1 minute to you.
Woo! So the one thing, or not one thing, but some of the things I would like y'all to know about our district is just that it's rapidly changing. So HD 28 has never been Democrat since it was formulated in the map redrawing. But that's not to say that this isn't the year. So in 2012, when Hillary Clinton ran for this seat, she lost by 30 points in this district. 4 years later, when Obama ran, he lost by 10 points. And in 2018, Beto lost this district by just under 3 points. So if we were to follow that trajectory, this is the year to flip this seat. And this is now a majority minority district. We have about 20% AAPI. We have 46% Caucasian. We have about 20% Hispanic, and the remainder are African American. So this is really an opportunity for your voice to be heard and for people to come out and actually use the power of their vote. For far too long, individuals have felt that their vote doesn't matter, especially in Fort Bend County, which has been considered a red good old boys club. But times are changing, and we're here to change it. And so I would ask you all to vote for us so we can bring about effective change to HD 28, Fort Bend County, and Texas as a whole.
Okay, so now we're ready for the audience questions. And audience, keep them coming. You've got some great questions in the news feed already. And so now, the candidates, we have to limit you to 30-second answers now because we want to make sure in the next half hour we get as many questions in as possible from the audience. So we'll start with you, Eliz. The first question comes about cannabis. Are you going to be a pro-cannabis candidate, and are you going to sign off on all that kind of legislation?
Yes.
30 seconds.
Yes, period, end of story. And I would ask that we use the tax revenue from that to boost and bolster our education system.
Great. Angela, where are you at on that issue?
Same answer. Absolutely same answer.
Okay.
Great.
Easy.
So our former county clerk here in Harris County, Diane Troutman, actually has submitted a question. So we're very excited to have her. Angela, specifically, are you getting help and support from student groups at UNT? And would also like to ask Eliz about the same question, but for U of H, Rice, any of the other. But Angela, since you come from a higher ed district specifically, like you were speaking, let's go to you first.
Yeah, we are getting lots of help and support from the campus groups and from students. Students are fired up, y'all. This Generation Z, they're not playing. They are the folks who are going to change our state and change our nation. There's absolutely no doubt about it. They are outraged at the current state of our state and state of our country, and they aren't going to take this. They're not going to be the ones who just sign off, kind of like my generation did, and decided to go apathy with it. They're out there ready to make a change. So we have lots of students who are interested in helping right now. We have several of my former students who used to be in my classroom who've come on board as interns for my campaign, who are doing lots of good work for us. And we're just really excited to harness that energy and put it to work for change here in House District 64.
Awesome. Liz?
So we don't actually have any institutions of higher education in our district, but we do have the University of Houston located at Sugar Land. We have the new UH Katy that's in Gina Kalani's district. We have UH Downtown. We have UH Main Campus. And so we've been able to garner the support of all of those different groups, especially the commuter students who do live in HD 28. We've also been able to work with the local high school, Seven Lakes High School Democrats, and they've been a huge instrumental help. They've grown tremendously and now have maybe 45 members who have come out and done lit drops and block walks and so on and so forth. And it's just great to have these youth engaged. And it makes me jealous that we didn't have stuff like that when I was in school.
That's amazing. It reminds me, I just heard Jane Fonda talking about how when she started activism, she thought of it as a sprint. Then she realized it was a marathon. And now that she's older, she really realizes it's a relay race, which is kind of where you're going with that. It's the same, like passing the baton, bringing them on board, onto the team. I love that. So Jaime's got our next audience question.
So Liz, tell us, we're going to move away from education for a second. Tell us what the COVID pandemic response team would look like in Texas in the future if you were in charge. Mm-hmm. What would the pandemic response team look like? I mean, Texas needs their own version because we can't wait for the federal government anymore.
That's right.
So first of all, there would be a team, right? I would have created a team full of medical professionals, public health professionals, individuals who were skilled in contract tracing and epidemiology to make sure that we were actually tracking the outbreak and creating, again, as I mentioned earlier, proactive plans instead of reacting. Right now, when I'm going to put in education, Jaime. So when educators left in March, they expected that the government was going to create plans for a safe reopening, not twiddle their thumbs for 4 or 5 months and then say, okay, well, here you go, back in, and not provide any reasonable solutions. So I think that we would need to create a broad coalition of experts and true experts like Fauci's, not experts who are like, oh, herd immunity, let's do that, and just blow it off. We need people who believe in facts and science. And so my goal would be to build a coalition built on facts and science.
Angela?
Yeah, absolutely. Putting a team in place to begin with is a great place to start, making sure that it is a science-driven team, folks who are really paying attention to what's going on with the epidemiology of these diseases, how it spreads, looking at the public health component. I would also include educators in a way that we maybe didn't necessarily plan for how this particular pandemic is impacting schools and it's impacting teachers and students and families. And that is something that before this, I might not have thought a lot about, but now I think it's become very clear to us that we need to include education in our plans for something like a pandemic, because it certainly has a very profound impact on what's happening with our schools. And when you profoundly impact schools, you profoundly impact families. So we want to make sure that we're bringing that education component into any planning that we do for future pandemics.
Thank you. It impacts our economy, right, Angela? Like if it's impacting our schools and our families, then it's going to have that rollover effect on our economy. Sorry, Jaime. I got excited.
No, you're good.
I mean, all of this is interconnected, right? And that's,
if more politicians understood that, I think we'd be in a better place, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. It's true. Most issues too, COVID-19 has just made us look at it more than maybe other issues make us look at it.
Well, and we're all home. Everybody's home more than they've been. So they have a few, maybe a few more hours to spend looking at things on the internet, which is both a blessing and a curse, isn't it? Okay, so once again, before we continue on, make sure you donate $17 to our candidates tonight. Sign up for a shift to volunteer. This is so important. If you are terrified of phone banking, now is the time to do it. You generally will have help on Zoom where we can all sit together and encourage each other and bring that spirit of cooperation to that type of organizing. It's weird, it's different, but it's so important. And your calls and your texts help. Your postcard writing helps. Your money is especially important during this time. $17. Please donate. Okay, so moving on to our next audience question. And this one is just kind of general. What do you think is our top priority here in the great state of Texas? And we'll start with Liz on this one. Sorry.
If you're asking me today what our top priority is, I would say that it's trying to safely reopen our economy and our schools and ensure that we have healthcare provisions for the upcoming flu outbreak coupled with COVID-19. Now, as the past year has shown us, things change in an instant. So that priority that I mentioned today may be totally different on January 21st. And so I think it's absolutely imperative that we measure the temperature of the state and of the counties before we set a single priority.
And Angela?
Yeah, I think it has to be our response to COVID-19 right now in the ways that it's impacting our communities. Like we've already talked about with education, with unemployment and small businesses that are being especially hard hit by this pandemic and the economic collapse that's happened around it, and thinking about what do we do to build back better coming out of this pandemic, and how do we get out of it first, right? Because we're not out yet. And so thinking about hopefully by January, this won't be the concern. Hopefully we will have structures in place, but my hopes maybe aren't high on that. So thinking about what do we need to do to actually control the spread of this virus and build back better.
Another part of the problem.
We just have to shout out to Angela for doing the Build Back Better, like bringing it back around to the national campaign. Like that is some really great political thinking, right? I just shout out. All right. Sorry, go ahead, Jaime.
It's okay. So, building on part of the problem is that we're living in an area with a lot of food deserts statewide. There's a lot of places communities that don't have access to grocery stores and to food and restaurants and all of that. Angela, let's start with you. How do you propose to address that issue?
Wow, what a great question, and so relevant to House District 64. We actually have a kind of a strange situation around our university. Around UNT is actually a food desert. So for students who are living in apartments around the university, there isn't any place that's terribly accessible to buy groceries. So they end up in corner markets and places where prices are much higher than they would be if they had access to the grocery store. Our local public transportation is trying real hard, but it's not great. So if you were dependent upon a bus or something to get you to a grocery store, it's going to be an all afternoon kind of a process to try and just pick up some groceries. So we really have to think about economic development for our local communities and how the state can come in to support local economic development and making sure that our cities are thinking about food deserts and how do we address that from the city level with state support.
And you, Liz, what do you think about it?
Yeah, so again, thank you for the good question. Nobody's ever asked that before, but it's very, very appropriate, especially in HD 28, which, as I said, is very quickly growing. It's also a very wealthy district, but that's not to say that there's not a huge chasm between socioeconomic status among different minority populations. And so just like with Angela, we don't have a solid public transportation system in Fort Bend County. We have a bus system that's at best and doesn't really go throughout the new growth of this district. And similar to Angela, people are buying food at corner markets, which is quite frankly overpriced and undernutritious. So we need to ensure that individuals have the accessibility, and perhaps it would be wise of Fort Bend County and our wonderful Judge KP George to invest in a public transportation option so that all individuals can access the nutritious foods that they need in order to be successful members of society.
God, yeah, those are great answers, and y'all are clearly well connected with the issues addressing your constituents. I really appreciate that. Our next question from the audience is one that you both will probably have great answers, and we've kind of addressed a little bit tonight. How will you address the problems with healthcare for retired teachers specifically? So we'll start with Eliz on this one.
Yeah, so first and foremost, we need to just revamp the teacher healthcare system, TRS healthcare, and ensure that teachers aren't paying their entire retirement towards their healthcare, which is currently what's happening right now. We need to provide them with the healthcare that they were promised when they took this job, which was once you retire, you will be cared for afterwards, and it won't be a drain on your finances. So we need to completely revamp the system, make sure that we have COLAs in place to take care of those teachers, and essentially it's just going to involve revamping the system.
Angela?
Yeah, and when we're talking about teacher retirement, I think it's hard to separate the health care from the retirement in general, right? And this idea that teachers haven't had a COLA, there hasn't been, we'll be done in a few minutes, kiddo. That there hasn't been a cost of living adjustment for teacher retirement in so long. And same is true for state employees too, by the way. And so we really have to look at tying these COLAs to inflation so that it doesn't have to be a vote in the legislature every session, that we really do what we need to do for the retirees in our state and the retirees of our school districts to make sure that they're getting what they need to be healthy and thrive in their retirement. And I totally agree with Eliz. We can't have a situation where entire retirement income is going to pay for the premium on the health insurance. We have to redo the system. And bringing down the overall cost of healthcare in general, right, will also help with that. So when we look at the entire healthcare market,
yeah, it really is all tied together, like you said.
So Angela, let's shift gears a little bit. The audience wants to know your thoughts on for-profit prisons, which are a big thing in Texas.
Oh yes, it's such a problem, right? Because if you have a for-profit prison, you have a need to supply that prison. Which means you need more prisoners, which means you're now caught in a situation of trying to put more people in prison. And I think that is absolutely the opposite of what our criminal justice system should be doing. Like, our goal should be to put fewer people in prison, to help work within communities, to build local economies and build our state economy to a place where crime isn't the best option for folks, to think about doing citations for, if it's an option to give a citation or to arrest someone, that we should really look at policies to do the citations instead of the arrest, so that we're keeping people out of the criminal justice system. And we certainly shouldn't have a system in place where we need to supply prisoners in order for those prisons to make their profit. That puts us in the wrong frame of mind when we're talking about criminal justice.
And Elise, what are your thoughts?
So I think for-profit prisons are antithetical to everything that we should stand for as a democratic state, and a country at large. I mean, here we're actively looking for people to fill a prison system in order to provide paychecks for people. And how nonsensical is that? I would say that we need to get rid of them altogether. And like Angela said, I think that we really need to evaluate what we are putting people in prison for. If it's a minor traffic stop, or if it's, a minor marijuana charge, it seems really nonsensical to spend, again, the $22,000 a year it takes to sustain a prisoner in our system, when that money could, quite frankly, be used elsewhere. And similar to that, we need to have bail reform, because individuals who are in for these minor charges, who may not have the means to bail themselves out, their lives are simply destroyed because of these infractions that shouldn't be charged with lifelong sentences, essentially.
Thank you both for your answers on that. We're going to move on to voter suppression, because that's what we're dealing with. Also here in Texas, it seems like we are the microcosm of all issues across the entire nation. This is from one of our wonderful activists and organizers, Jackie Hazelwood. given the long history of voter suppression in Texas, including the current lawsuits pertaining to Texas's excuse-only access to being able to vote by mail, what legislation would you guys propose, y'all, I should say, be more fair and non-binary? What would your first legislation be to propose ensure fair and equitable voter registration and fair elections? And Eliz, we'll start with you.
So first and foremost, I think we need to have online voter registration. I think for far too long, we've had it to where you need to either mail it in or go to the DMV. And quite frankly, that's out of date and inequitable to individuals who may not be able to make it out to those places. I think we also need to allow mail-in voting for any individual who requests it. There have been no studies that show that voter fraud is an issue. Even our very own The Lincoln Project has come out, and the Heritage Project have come out, not our very own, that was sarcasm, and said that there is no instance of widespread voter fraud. I would also say that the USPS has said that the amount of mail-in voting, which is roughly 335 million ballots, is what they do in a single day. So the fact that we're saying, oh, the post office is going to be overwhelmed, there's no way it can be done fairly and equitably, is absolutely asinine at best.
Absolutely. And Angela, to you, what's the first piece of legislation you'd propose?
Yeah, definitely online voter registration and same-day voter registration. That we need to take the barrier of voter registration out of the equation. People should be able to show up on election day and cast their ballot. This is America. Your vote is your vote. There should not be hurdles to jump over in order to cast your vote. I think we have to increase the number of polling places available. That we have seen very dramatic cuts to polling sites. Okay, thank you. That we have seen lots of cuts in county funding and the number of polling sites available, which is leaving people having to stand in line for ages when it comes to casting their votes. So we need more polling sites. We know that disproportionately affects. Okay, yeah, she sees you. We know it disproportionately affects people of color and community and voting precincts that have high minority levels of voters. And
I have the invite for me to see her.
Thanks, man. And then we definitely need no excuse mail-in votes.
Oh.
What's your son's name?
This is Leo.
Leo?
Hi.
Leo. So vote for Leo's mom, right?
Everybody
and vote for Eliz Markowitz and make sure.
Can everybody see me?
Yes, Leo, can you tell everybody to vote for your mom?
Can you tell everyone to vote for mom?
Say vote for mom.
Vote for mom.
Yay! That's the best endorsement yet. Love it. Okay,
I'm going to do a follow-up question on that one y'all just answered, because I'm hearing a lot of candidates talk about making it easier to register to vote, online registration, things like that. But there are some states that have automatic voter registration with an opt-out option. So in other words, you're automatically registered if you're a citizen of that state. And it's up to you to decide that you don't want that right to vote. And so instead of opting into voting, we could actually just change the system, turn it on its head and say you'd have to opt out. I mean, what's wrong with having everybody already be registered to vote? Why do we even have voter registration in the first place?
I think you just got 2 votes for your legislation there, Jaime. Yes, let's do that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense. Jaime, come visit Angela and myself on January 22nd. We'll make it happen.
We already have a Blue Outpost where we've been thinking about coming to Austin to come see y'all when y'all get elected. So lobby you.
Absolutely. Okay.
All right, Jaime, do you want to do?
Let me go to the next question. That was my question. I apologize to the audience for throwing that in. But so audience question, the next one. This is back to an education issue. The audience seems to like education after all. So there's an issue. There's an issue right now that, and I don't know if you're aware of it, but educators are not allowed to talk about LGBTQIA issues in the K through 12 classrooms unless they also at the same time talk about the risky behavior behind LGBTQIA issues. What are your thoughts on that? Now, Liz, we'll start with you.
So as a member of the LGBTQIA plus population, if there's any risky behavior, it's being happy with whom you are. And so I think that such misinformation is actually simply exacerbating the current divisions that we see in today's society. I think it's completely ridiculous that this is actually a law. And I have told many individuals that I would be more than happy to take this on and try to repeal that piece of legislation, because quite frankly, LGBTQIA people are just like you and me. In fact, I am one, and we're totally fine. We're not that risky. We're just people trying to do what we can to fight the good fight.
And Angela?
Yeah, I've been mystified for most of my grown-up life as to how this has become a political issue. I've just thought the idea of people being true to themselves and loving who they love and developing their relationships and their families, and it is time to move past this. Right? It is 2020. We are well into the 21st century. It is time to leave these old, outdated ideas behind and make sure that I have some concerns for our LGBTQI youth, right? And that they need to find safe spaces in schools, and they need to find allied adults who they know they can trust and count on. We know that suicide attempts among young people who identify as queer are through the roof, right? We have to think compassionately and with empathy about these young people and making sure that they have those safe spaces and safe adults in their lives. And I think that repealing legislation like this would be a great step to doing that for these young people.
So we're kind of to the end of our big sequence. I'm going to let Carly start the wrap up sequence here with you getting 2 minutes each to talk about anything you want to talk about. Remind the audience your website, by the way, when you're doing that. And to the audience, thank you all for your questions. There's a lot more that we didn't get to on Facebook. Hopefully, candidates, you'll log on and answer some of these questions, even the ones you've already answered in person. If you'll just go on to Facebook and write some things, the audience definitely appreciates that. And thank you all for being here. Carly, wrap it up for us.
Ladies, I want to thank you both for being here. As a woman myself, I have to say that to see such impressive candidates out there trying to represent us and to really fight for equality for all of us is inspiring. And I can see just from your conversation between the two of you how cooperative you'll be when you get to the State House. So we cannot wait to elect you. Make sure you donate $17 to these candidates and give your time and your money. Now, I'm going to give each of these wonderful candidates 1 minute to do a kind of wrap up. So we're going to start with Angela.
Great. Thank you so much. I actually just bribed my child with ice cream that if he can hold it together and be quiet, then we'll get some ice cream when we're done. So so hopefully you might see him popping up, but maybe he won't say anything for the next minute. I have to just thank everyone for being here tonight and taking this election seriously. It is not an exaggeration to say this is the most important election of our lifetime. It hands down is the most important election of our lifetime. We have so many things we need to change, and I'm not just talking about President Trump. I'm really talking about our state and the future of our state. We know that the next session of the legislature is a map drawing session. That what happens in the Texas legislature, maybe you're not going to get the ice cream if you can't straighten up. What happens in the next legislature with Matt is going to impact what goes on in our state for the next 10 years, as far as our congressional districts, our state house districts, our state senate districts, our state board of education districts, which is huge. We just have to flip. We just have to flip the Texas House this year, y'all. It's not an option. It has to be done. We have some amazing candidates, some 17 candidates.
Dad, I need your help.
Okay, your ice cream's on the line right now, man. We have 17 districts that are targeted, and 17 fantastic candidates in this state who are ready to put a new majority in place and ready to get our state back on the right track. So We're in crunch time now. The last 2 months are here. No more days off. We need all hands on deck without a doubt to make sure that we're doing everything we need to do to flip the Texas House. So get out there, do your volunteer work, make your donations, talk to your friends, amplify our messages on your favorite social media. So retweet us, repost us. We can really use that help. Thanks, y'all, for your patience and your accommodation to my friend.
I have to say that if you don't think that Miss Brewer over here is capable of handling all of the craziness that comes with politics, she just managed this forum for an hour and a half while managing a fantastically rambunctious young Leo. So we want to thank both of you for being here, and I hope he gets his ice cream. All right, and so for our last minute with our candidates, I want to say thank you again to both of you women for being here tonight. It has been a pleasure and an honor, and I hope that it's not the last conversation that we have. I do hope that the next conversation is at the State House. So, Eliz, this is it. Your minute to wrap up, and thank you again.
So to Carly, to Jaime, to Angela, my wonderful conspirator in this forum, and to Blue Outpost Texas, thank you guys for putting this together and allowing us to reach so many engaged individuals in the state of Texas. I also want to give a huge shout out to everyone across this state who has stuck with me for the past year and a half through the special election and now into November. We have so much to do, and I want you to know that I am not running for personal power or prestige. I am running to do what is best for the people of this district, this county, and this state. And I hope that together we will be able to create a more equitable Texas that works for all of the diverse populations across this state. If anyone has any questions for me, please feel free to reach out. Our website is www.eliz4tx.com. And if you would like to sign up to volunteer, you can do so. We have phone banks, we have power hours. We have so many exciting volunteer opportunities to help flip the most populated, fastest growing district in Texas in 53 days. But I cannot do it alone. So as Carly said, if you can donate $17 or $17,000, we would greatly appreciate it. And thank you guys for everything you do. Let's get this done, team.
Yes. Absolutely. Thank you both so much for your time tonight. It's been fantastic. It really has. It's been eye-opening. And I definitely, when we can, I want to have a drink with all of you.
And audience, remember to join us next Sunday night, every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday through this month and probably into October. We're going to have similar forums with candidates from all over the state. Help us flip the House, help us flip the Senate, help us flip all of these offices in Texas. We are a blue state, and don't let anybody tell you any different. It's a blue state where Democrats just have not been voting.
That's right.
And so just get out to vote. Democrats, don't be afraid. Go vote. We'll see you Sunday night. Thank y'all, everybody.
Thank y'all.
Go vote, y'all.
Go vote. Go vote.